Welcome. Thanks for tuning in. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on your time zone. My name is Zanne van der A, and together with Miranda Nijenhuis, we are hosting this customer experience podcast for you. I combine a PhD in customer experience with 20 plus years of experience in CX transformation internationally, and my goal is to share my knowledge so we can enhance the quality of CX programs in as many organizations as possible across the globe. Yes, I know, it's a tiny dream, but come on, let's at least try to change the world together. Miranda has been my partner in crime for the last 8 years, working together on many CX programs. In this series, she will be interviewing me on CX topics that are top of mind in most organizations we work with.
Today we are talking about the sense and nonsense of NPS, right?
Yes.
Maybe nice to start with a little trip down memory lane.
Yes. The history of the Net Promoter Score. And although I tend to say, yes, I did my PhD, but I'm not a science person, I do tend to see value in understanding, okay, where did something come from? And especially with the Net Promoter Score. So it was created by Mr. Reichheld in 2003. And the idea behind it was there was a search of companies, how can I make it easier to measure loyalty? Because when you look from a scientific perspective, the definition of loyalty consists of repurchase intentions. Do I want to buy again with this company?
Yeah.
Word of mouth, which of course links to NPS. Price insensitivity. There's a lot of proof that if I'm more happy, then I'm also willing to pay more. And complaining behavior. So those four are the original definitions of loyalty from a scientific perspective. Which of course then has 3 statements for each. So let's say it's a scale of 12 statements, so not super easy, right? And a lot of companies of course still want that holy one question. So he was inspired by an organization that used the question to ask, hey, would you recommend us? And that question appeared to be a very good predictor of profitability. So the original search of the NPS was to measure loyalty.
Yeah.
And then what that company did is that they followed up. So let's say if a customer scored low on willingness to recommend, they would send that email to an account manager and they would call them, hey Miranda, I see you gave us a 5-6. Is there anything I can do to fix it? So that's the original feedback loop, right?
Yeah.
You measure it, and that's also often called direct feedback. So remember 2 things. It was originally measured to prove loyalty, and to be used as direct feedback on an individual basis. Fast forward almost 20 years later.
I was thinking 2003.
Yeah.
I think, it's not that long ago. Oh,
Yeah.
wow, 19 years.
Yeah, gray hairs.
Exactly. That's when you get older, right?
So 2 things happened. One is, of course, because the adoption of NPS is incredible, right?
Yeah.
I think if anybody should study a marketing case, it should be the adoption of NPS. There's not a company in the world that's not using it right now, right? So, super case. But 2 things happened. Of course, when you start using this in B2C with, 100,000 customers, it's virtually impossible to follow up everybody individually. So I cannot fix if you have a personal low NPS. That's one part. If I do, because some companies are using direct feedback, then I tend to use a calculation. Because a lot of companies feel, but hey, if we use NPS for direct feedback, of course this will enhance in the end our total NPS. But just humor me in this calculation. Let's say that we send a survey to 100% of our customers. Average response rate, 20%.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. So 20% of the customers responds. Let's say 25% is unhappy. So that means 5% of your customers are unhappy. So if you would call all of those customers, you're only impacting 5% of your customer base with direct feedback. And that calculation is often missing, right? So you're only impacting the people that actually told you, I'm not super happy.
Yeah.
That's one part to be super aware of. The other part, then organizations tell me yes, but of course from the causes, right, of those people that we call that say, hey, it was, I don't know, the speed of the process. We can of course learn and then fix the whole journey. But then the risk is, again, in one of the other podcasts about drivers, is that you get rational feedback. So customers will say it was about the speed or it was about something else, which is not their true latent need. So there's a double risk in using NPS for direct feedback.
Yeah.
That's one part. On the loyalty part, of course, what happened in the last few years is that it's not directly connected to measuring profitability, but they went a step back to see, okay, how can we find the root causes of NPS, right? So what can we do to enhance our Net Promoter Score? And I'm just thinking, maybe in case you haven't heard about the Net Promoter Score, it's a question, right? Would you recommend company X on a scale of 0 to 10?
Yeah.
But then the calculation they do, and that's where one of the challenges comes in, is that the percentage of customers that give you 9 or 10, the other way around, because I'm using detraction. So the percentage giving you a 0 to 6 is detracted from the percentage of customers that rate you a 9 and 10.
Yeah.
So the group, which is often the biggest group, from 7 and 8, is not part of this calculation.
Yeah.
So they started figuring out what's the methodology to find the drivers of NPS, the so-called root cause analysis. And that's often a mix of either I'm using a predefined topics that customers can choose, or the one question in an open text and you're using AI to analyze the open texts.
So I give the number 0 to 10 and they ask me why, and that's it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or indeed I give the number 0 to 10 and then they have often 2 levels of root cause. So they ask first, okay, what sort of level 1? Hey, it was in the customer service contact, and then a second level, was it the employee or something else?
Yeah.
But it's often 2 levels of root causes that we use. So the direct feedback we already discussed, right? That's challenging to then enhance the journey of thousands of customers. But also when you look at the root cause technique, you're lacking sort of the statistical check if there's actually a cause and effect between the root causes you found and your NPS score.
Yeah.
And again, the disclaimer, I think we had a disclaimer in one of the other podcasts, but let me repeat it here. If you are using NPS, you're measuring it, you're doing your root cause analysis, you're improving, and you see your NPS increase, I haven't said anything, right? I think that's the key that everybody wants to figure out. So if that's working for you, it's increasing fast enough, then just keep doing what you're doing. If you feel, so the 1 and 2 main issues that I get from companies is it's super volatile. Right? So one quarter I have plus 10, exactly. The next quarter minus 30, and I have no way to explain it. And the calculation is one part of the explanation. And the second part is, okay, so we have these root causes, but they're so abstract because often the predefined topics are, let's say, invoicing or are, I don't know, the network of something, right? So then you still don't know, okay, maybe this was mentioned a lot of times, but I still don't know what now do I need to improve. So that's why we're saying if you want to use NPS, well, ideally you would measure just once a year. Remember in the podcast about setting the compass, we talked about the 5 types of experience.
Yeah.
So NPS for me is really positioned for brand experience. Once a year, sanity check, are we moving in the right direction?
Yeah.
But of course, many companies are using it to measure the channels or touch points or the journeys. So if you want to have the drivers to enhance that one, then make sure you use smart statistics to really understand, okay, what are the key topics that I can enhance to have the fastest way to increase NPS.
Yeah, so instead of these root causes, you do this smart statistics thing, right?
Exactly.
And I think we talked about it in the last podcast, so you can see the podcast of the driver analysis.
Yeah.
But maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so when we say smart statistics, we have 2 things, right? One is how do you build a survey? And the second part is, okay, which statistics do you use? So when we say on the survey side, we build it really based on a journey. So we do a journey workshop to understand what steps do the customers go through, and using the steps, so the transactional side, plus the emotion, those elements together we use to build a survey, which is pretty long, 30, 40 statements, not one question and an open text.
Mm-hmm.
And then we send it to customers who have recently experienced that journey. So that's, let's say, on how do you create a list of possible root causes, right?
Yeah.
It's all the steps in the journey and their emotion. And on the smart statistics side, so as soon as 100 or more customers have filled out that survey, then you can run these statistics. And it's 3 techniques. And you can forget about these techniques and let somebody do that for you, but then you know which ones to use. It's factor analysis. So factor analysis groups those 30, 40 questions where the customers say, hey, question number 1, 5, 11, and 12, they belong together. And then you scan and you say, hey, this is all related to personal attention. Apparently their latent subconscious need is personal attention.
Yeah,
Right? That's how you find these subconscious drivers.
Yeah.
So that's what factor analysis does. Then the regression analysis tells you, okay, but factor A is 5 times more impactful than factor C, for example. So this is what really puts you in the driving seat.
Yeah.
And gives you super clear, we just mentioned that, laser focus. If I'm just constantly thinking about this number one driver and I do this in all my interactions, then I have the fastest way to increase the NPS. So that's when we say smart statistics, that you just can prove with the data, improving this is 5 times more impactful than improving something else.
Yeah.
Did we cover everything?
I think so.
Yes?
Yeah, I think so. Do you want to say anything more about the NPS?
No, I think the key is, I think with NPS it's interesting, right? That a lot of, let's say, CX experts are feeling the NPS is maybe not the best metric. You have satisfaction, you have customer effort score. But you see still in almost all the boards, it's still sort of the key, the one holy metric.
Yeah, it's really adopted.
It's really adopted. So I think maybe 10 years from now we'll have a different metric, but I think that's too soon. So I think the advice is, if indeed you cannot convince the board to measure it once a year, and you really need it to be in the driving seat, then that's fine. But then make sure that you adapt your root causes so you really are in the driving seat of enhancing the NPS.
Yes.
Having heard about the sense and nonsense of the Net Promoter Score, we now continue with the sense and nonsense of the customer effort score. Start with the history, but let's start. If you're listening to this podcast, by the way, what I'm putting in front of the screen is the book. So the authors of the book are Matthew Dixon, Nick Tolman, and Rick Delisi. And the book is called The Effortless Experience. So in case you want to not just trust my judgment, but read about it yourself, that's the book where it came from. And they launched this book in 2013. So when you look at the history of, let's say, the 3 key metrics in experience, that's satisfaction, the Net Promoter Score, and customer effort score.
Yeah.
So I tend to sort of make it a bit black and white by saying, okay, we had satisfaction. That worked relatively well until at one point the satisfaction sort of stabilized at this 7.5. And instead of companies thinking, maybe I'm not improving the right things, right? They thought, it would be nice to have a different metric. So in 2003, Reichelt introduced the Net Promoter Score, and that really took off.
Yeah.
And then in 2013, they introduced the customer effort score. And honestly, because a lot of companies were struggling with the Net Promoter Score, so also at that time in the company I was working for, we really felt, hey, this would be super cool, right? We have a beautiful alternative for the Net Promoter Score. Because before I read the book, there was a Harvard Business Review article published that had proven that the customer effort score was a much better predictor for loyalty, but then loyalty was defined as, let's say, repeat purchase.
Yeah.
It was a much better predictor than the Net Promoter Score and satisfaction. So we thought, hey, super cool. And of course, the whole idea of ease of doing things makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of things where we felt, hey, this would be maybe the new holy metric. But being stubborn, as we are, we felt, okay, it's just Harvard Business Review.
Let's do it ourselves.
Come on, we can test it ourselves. So we used the data from the contact center and we reproduced the model. And in our analysis, we saw that customer effort score was the least predictive of the three, and that the NPS and the satisfaction almost had the same prediction in relation with loyalty. So there I said, okay, maybe not a huge fan, but the idea of ease is still super valuable. And we felt, hey, it's not an end metric, but ease of doing things should be a predictor of satisfaction. So we always use ease in the service we make for call center, for example. And indeed, you see that it is part of driving satisfaction, but it's not the number one.
Yeah, exactly.
So yes, it matters, but it's not the holy, at least based on our data, right? That's just our opinion, that we didn't see the ultimate effect on loyalty.
Yeah.
Right? It's super valuable for the call center setting to use it. They also have amazing examples where they just A/B tested purely the way the employee was explaining something, and the difference in customer effort score was extreme. So I would definitely, if you are in the contact center business, I would definitely advise you to read it, because you have super cool ideas that you can start doing tomorrow. It's just more that the connection to loyalty, I'm less convinced about that.
Yeah, exactly. So how is it intended to be used, and how is it be used at this moment?
So in their book, what they intended to use it as, let's say, the ultimate end metric predicting loyalty.
Yeah.
In the, let's say, in the customer service setting. So they've measured web and call interactions.
Yeah.
And then did a survey on that group of people. And what I see now with organizations using it, they are sometimes using it in a call center setting, but also more and more in a, let's say, UX, user experience setting. So for example, I'm using an app, how easy is it to use the app? How easy is it to do something online?
Sounds like a plan, right?
That last one definitely sounds like a plan. So also in the podcast about the 5 types of experience, right? User experience being the 5th one. I also position customer experience, the customer effort score as a key metric for UX.
Yeah.
Because you have two advantages. Because also in one of the previous podcasts about finding the drivers, we said that you have to be very careful with analyzing open answers. But a customer effort score, it's so transactional, so concrete, that there it's absolutely fine to ask, okay, what's one thing that we can do to make it easier next time? So there it's absolutely fine to use the one question with the open text.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just triggered now because I'm saying ease.
Mm-hmm.
Because I also had a discussion a few weeks ago with an organization, because the original customer effort score is all about how much effort did it take.
Yeah.
That's sort of the negative side, right? So it took a lot of effort.
Yeah.
But part of this book as well is that at the end of the book, they introduce already version 2.0,
mm-hmm.
where they discovered the framing of the amount of effort is too complex also for customers to fill it out.
Mm-hmm.
So they rephrase it as ease.
Okay.
So then the definition, for example, becomes XXX made it easy for me to do something.
Yeah.
The app made it easy for me to, order a new product. The website made it easy for me to do X. And then the same scale, right? So from completely disagree to completely agree. And I think that's indeed is the more pragmatic translation than the how much effort did it take you to do something.
Yeah.
So I think on the UX side, it's super valuable. On the customer service side, as I mentioned, we just added it as part of the survey, but then using the statistics to see how big is the impact of ease on satisfaction.
Yeah, exactly. And if it's a bigger impact, then you know.
Exactly. And what we've seen so far is that, let's say, the number one driver for satisfaction with customer service is the employee,
mm-hmm.
listening well, answering the question. I think if I remember correctly, that was an impact of roughly, let's say, 0.5, while then ease had an impact of 0.2.
Yeah.
Just to give you an idea about the ratio between the impact of ease and the employee or the human side.
Yeah. All right. Other ways that we can use the customer effort score?
I'm just thinking now, yes, other ways, but I'm also reminded of one of the key statements that they are making is how customer effort drives loyalty.
Yeah.
And I think there are two flaws in their thinking.
Yeah.
So one flaw is that, so they say in the book that they don't find hardly any relationship between satisfaction and loyalty. But they are checking the satisfaction with service and loyalty defined as repeat purchase.
Satisfaction is so much more than that, right?
Yeah, and loyalty as well.
Yeah.
Right, so if I'm thinking about am I going to buy something again at Amazon, it's not just my satisfaction with the call center that defines that. Right, so for me that analysis makes sense, that there's not a super hard relation between service satisfaction and loyalty.
Yeah. That's
one part where I think it's flawed. And the other part is that from the scientific perspective on loyalty and satisfaction, the satisfaction and loyalty, they do have a direct impact, but that's pretty low. But you have trust and commitment as so-called mediators. So from a scientific perspective, you use the model, and it's becoming a bit technical, but you have satisfaction influences trust influences commitment, and then commitment influences loyalty. So then if you add all the indirect effects plus the direct effect of satisfaction, then satisfaction for sure still drives loyalty.
Yeah.
But not just satisfaction, right? It's from an 8 or more.
Yeah.
That's where you get the lever of indeed seeing impact on the repeat purchases. Just had to make this scientific point very clear.
Yeah, very well, very well. All right. The last question, can we use it for anything more, or should we use it for this UX design?
Yeah, I think in my experience, I would definitely use it for UX, and then with the open answers.
Yeah. So
just super concrete. If you use the 5-point scale, and let's say people rate you 1 or 2, you have the let's say dynamic second question. Hey, that's I'm sorry that it's so low. Is there one thing we can do to improve it? So also not too abstract. What could we have done? Or just call one thing.
Yeah.
If it's 5, hey, that's amazing. We're happy. What was the thing that made it so easy for you? Right. So make your follow-up question dependent on the score that people give you.
Yeah.
And then you can use your text analysis to see, okay, what's the thing that we should improve to make it more easy.
And we talk about this more in the next podcast, right? About the 5 experiences and...
Yeah, and depending on, of course, when you're listening to this podcast, it's either the next podcast or you had already heard this.
Exactly. So it's in another podcast.
It's in one of the other podcasts. And also one of the next podcasts we will be doing is, so we've done the sense and nonsense of NPS. This is the sense and nonsense of the customer effort score.
Yeah.
And we'll be making also the sense and nonsense of satisfaction.
Yeah. We have a lot of ideas for next podcast, so stay put.
Enough coming your way.
All right. Thank you so much. And having all heard of this, we're really curious about your one key insight and the action that you're taking from this podcast. So let us know, and hope to see you next time. Ciao.
See you next time. Bye.